Is Toei Animation milking the Dragon Ball cow for all it's worth? Getting that sweet, delicious green milk until it finally dries up? And then what happens to the Dragon Ball cow? Does it go to the slaughterhouse? Hello there, beautiful friends from around the world. I'm going to be your host, Blackenfist. And is the Dragon Ball franchise currently being milked? Of course, with all the new material that we've gotten, it has been unprecedented. 2015, we received an incredible amount of Dragon Ball material. We got a new video game in Xenoverse, we got a new movie in Resurrection F, and most astonishingly, we got a new anime series, and even a manga, Dragon Ball Super. But with all that excitement, and with most Dragon Ball fans cheering in glee, that Dragon Ball, this old franchise, is getting revitalized, some more cynical fans are taking a different approach and maybe saying, perhaps this is milking the series in an unjustified way. Before we continue though, obviously I want to say that a lot of fans have been saying this sentiment, but the problem here is that the term milked can mean different things to different people, so I feel that the way to really examine this is to go back into history to really see whether what is going on this year is anything new. If we go back to the 90s when the Dragon Ball Z anime concluded airing, we got Dragon Ball GT. Now Dragon Ball GT existed because even after the ending of the manga and anime, Dragon Ball was still a very hot property and people, believe it or not, still hungered for more Dragon Ball. Now, was GT milking the series? Well, when you think back to it, yeah, I mean it is. If you really think about it, the series was already over, and although people did initially want more Dragon Ball, I don't think it's unquestionable that you could label what happened with GT as milking the series. Now, did GT milk the series to death? Obviously not. But after that, this is what I would call the Dragon Ball drought. In this period of time, most of what would happen in the Dragon Ball realm was mainly the video games. Budokai 2, 3, Tenkaichi 2, and 3. Throughout the 2000s, we got a vast array of video games even after GT concluded. So I want to ask the question again. Were all the video games that we got previously milking the series? Some people would label it that as such. If you think about it, how many times did we play the same Dragon Ball story over and over again in these video games? Yes, perhaps some of them had maybe a unique what-if scenario that was unique to that game that we never seen before, but for the most part, it was the same Dragon Ball story that we had played before and we had seen before so many times. You could say it was the same story that was being milked over and over again. So after all that, I want to fast forward to 2009 because we got Dragon Ball Kai. Dragon Ball Kai, a series where it was a more cut down version of the Dragon Ball Z anime to more closely resemble the manga. This was an attempt to revitalize Dragon Ball Z and maybe bring it to new fans and also get rid of some of the older complaints about the series dragging on too much. Was Dragon Ball Kai milking the series? Well, quite honestly, a lot of people thought that's exactly what Kai was. People have seemed to have forgotten, but when Dragon Ball Kai was first coming out, there was a huge speculation on what Kai was actually going to be, and a lot of fans like myself believed that Dragon Ball Kai was going to be a reanimated series of the Dragon Ball Z portion of the Dragon Ball manga, and that's what we thought Dragon Ball Kai was going to be. Clearly it wasn't. Dragon Ball Kai reused the same Dragon Ball Z footage and maybe tweaked it a little bit for modern times. But if you really think about it, isn't that just milking older stuff? I mean, you didn't even produce anything, you just rehashed something from before. But then again, was Dragon Ball Kai such a detriment? I know that at least in the English side of things, Dragon Ball Kai was an enormous help because at least it gave Funimation the excuse to make a better English dub than what was previously produced. Even though I myself might not prefer Kai, and I will say that I was initially kind of bummed out with how Kai was because it wasn't a newly animated series, in the end, even though I don't prefer it, I can maybe understand the value Kai did bring. But I could also understand the other side of things where people are saying this is the same rehashed stuff that we've seen before. It's even the same exact animation that came out in the early 90s. You could say they were milking the series. Now I want to come forward to 2015 and the current year, 2016, and ask the same question. Is the new stuff that we've been receiving, Dragon Ball Xenoverse, Resurrection F, and even Battle of Gods to a certain extent, and especially Dragon Ball Super, are they milking the series? With Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, their cases are slightly different. Battle of Gods was a huge deal when it was announced. The fact that a new Dragon Ball movie was even announced in the first place was a huge deal, and it really felt that it could have been something bigger. I don't think many people said that Battle of Gods was milking the series. People might have had their complaints about Battle of Gods, but overall I think Battle of Gods' existence was pretty well justified. It was until Resurrection F that more people started to question whether this really justified its own existence. Most notably, Mr. Fusion, who I respect a ton, didn't really like Resurrection F because it didn't seem to have brought anything new to the table. It seemed that Frieza just came back and died, and nothing new was brought. No interesting concepts were introduced in the world of Dragon Ball, and I could see that. But at the same time, this is nothing new. Although I could understand the sentiments of people like Mr. Fusion, I also stood back and I looked at Resurrection F and I compared it to the other Dragon Ball Z movies from the past, and in my opinion, Resurrection F is better than most of them. And once you think about it, are all the other Dragon Ball Z movies from the past milking the series? Because they were almost the exact same basic story structure of new villain comes, delivers a threat, the hero has to do a special move or transformation, and then it resolves the problem. That was kind of most of the Dragon Ball Z movies. It was rehashed. You could say they were milking the same concept, and Resurrection F did the same thing essentially. Resurrection F had a very old school mindset in terms of how it was structured, like the older Dragon Ball Z movies. And I could understand how people say that Resurrection F was milking the series a little bit too much, but in that same token, then I would have to say, just for you to be consistent, you have to say the other movies from the past were also milking the series. I mean, if you think about it, most of the movies, did they really bring that much new to the table? I would say that most of them didn't. Dragon Ball Xenoverse isn't brought into the conversation a lot, but I have to say that Dragon Ball Xenoverse is probably one of the most unique Dragon Ball video games to ever come out, especially for a fighting game. Just the very fact that Xenoverse has a completely unique story makes it a world apart from what previously came before, where they were rehashing the same story over and over again. But the big fish to fry is Dragon Ball Super, because although people bring up Xenoverse and more people bring up Resurrection F, Super is where most of the complaints are. It's the one that comes into question the most. Is Super milking the series too much? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. What Super has been so far with the retelling of the movies, I could compare a lot to Dragon Ball Kai, and I know that's kind of a weird comparison, but bear with me. Although Super and Kai have their differences, obviously, in terms of rehashing and reusing things, they're very similar. Kai reused things on the technical side of things, like the animation. A more cynical viewer could say Toei Animation is too cheap to spend on an actual new series, so they just reuse the same footage that they had in their vaults, so they could save that all-important money. While on the Super side of things, a more cynical viewer could say the writers and producers are so unoriginal and they're unwilling to do anything new that they're just going to rehash the same story and plot that we just literally got a couple months prior with Resurrection F and a little bit before that with Battle of Gods. Is retelling both of the movies in Dragon Ball Super, was that really necessary? I could understand someone saying no. I think that's one of the biggest complaints about Dragon Ball Super, and I could understand that you could be milking just a little bit too much. Once again, I know that Super is going to have a never-before-seen Dragon Ball story later on, but the fact remains that for a lot of people, Super started off on the wrong foot. And I could understand how some people could perceive that maybe some of the newer stuff is being milked, but at the same time, the reason I did go into history is because I think it's very important to put it into perspective that this is nothing new. This has happened in the past. with Kai, with the video games, with GT. This is nothing new to the Dragon Ball franchise, so to single out these new things specifically, I think is a bit unfair. And I also think it's a bit unfair even on stuff like Super, because at the very least, Super, unlike Kai, is going to have an original story, unlike Kai, which was a rehashing of a previous one. That's not trying to belittle Kai, but just trying to get together all the factors to get a clearer picture. But anyway, guys, I know this is a very subjective video, so I want to ask you guys, do you think that Dragon Ball is currently being milked too much? Do you think it's unjustifiable? And maybe do you think Dragon Ball should finally go to rest? Or do you think no, there are plenty of Dragon Ball fans who are absolutely excited that Dragon Ball is back? I certainly am a bit excited, with just a little bit of caution, but I am excited for all the new Dragon Ball material that we have. Which side of the fence do you line? And did I miss anything? But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video and enjoyed my opinion, please subscribe to the channel, as you will get many more videos like this and my excellent Dragon Ball segments along with it. But anyway, guys, until Dragon Ball calls again, I'm Blackenfist, and I'm out, man.